Hello and welcome back. Now a few episodes ago we took a look at the Nintendo Game Boy, probably the best selling handheld console of all time. Although maybe the Nintendo Switch has taken that role now. But what a great little machine, a lot of us grew up playing this. It had a great library of games, a battery life that would probably last you all day and maybe even longer, and awesome third party support. It did have that black and white screen, but that didn't bother us back in the day. But this time we're going to look at a console that does things the opposite way. It's got a small library of games, terrible battery life, hardly any third party support, but an awesome colour screen. Or at least it was back then. This is the Atari Lynx, and if memory serves me correctly, I swapped my original Game Boy in a few games for this. Maybe that was somewhere around 1991, 92, something like that. I think by then the Atari Lynx might have already been on its way out, but I just couldn't believe this thing. It looked incredible, it had an amazing design, not to mention awesome sound and graphics. And also that colour screen. I think the Atari Lynx was released around 1989, so keep that in mind when you're looking at this thing. If you're even alive back in 1989, think about what games you were playing. Maybe you were playing on your Master System, maybe you were playing on your Spectrum. Compare games like that to something that runs on this. It really was a bit of a powerhouse in your pocket, this thing. Atari Lynx games shipped in cardboard boxes, which makes it a bit of a pain to collect for, a bit like the Game Boy, Nintendo 64 and Super Nintendo. These boxes just don't last, or if you do find them these days they're in a terrible condition. The Lynx however didn't sell amazingly well, so you can still find lots of sealed games out there on eBay. Here's a look at some of the boxes. This is Todd's Adventures in Slime World. I bought this brand new, but you can see because it was sealed in plastic, it sort of shrunk it down a little bit and damaged the box, but that's what you've got to live with. Most of the time you'll just find the cartridges themselves for sale, but I think these things are really cool. Look how thin they are, 16-bit games in your pocket, and thinner than a Nintendo Game Boy cartridge. There's some nice artwork on these, and there's also a little handle on the back, just to help pull it out of the machine. I hadn't taken a look at my Atari Lynx for quite a few years, so when opening the box I found this flyer for a few games. It shows Double Dragon, which maybe along with Lemmings is probably one of the most valuable games on the system, and also Desert Strike. And Desert Strike on this system is absolutely brilliant, it's a really good conversion. There's a letter from Electronics Boutique in the box, and it also gives you a bit of a flashback in time. Look at these things you could buy back in the day, a Jaguar CD unit for £95. I had a quick look on eBay and there's one for sale for £567 in the USA. I'm sure we'd all like to travel back in time with a fistful of cash and pick up all these things. On the back is a Telegames games list, showing all the games you can buy. I wish some of these games were still these prices. Switchblade 2 for $9.99, I'd pick that up any day of the week, that's a great game on this system. But look at that, Atari Lynx 2 console with power supply unit, $34.99. If I was there back in the day I'd probably buy about 5 of them now. But let's take a look at the one that I do have. Now I recorded this bit of video back in July, and unfortunately all is not well. The console itself looks awesome, it's in really good condition this one. Unfortunately when you try and load a game, it's got a real big problem with the screen. You've got this really annoying problem with these horizontal lines appearing. You can just about tilt the screen so they don't show up so much, you can kind of play it, but it's no way to play the games. Like some electronics from the 1990s, a lot of them have cheap capacitors, so I was going to send these off to have them replaced. I could have possibly done this myself, but I don't really have the equipment, so I'm going to send it off to the professionals. I found Retro Passion online, and they've got a good reputation for repairing and recapping systems. But I had heard they weren't very quick, and yeah, that is true. I sent off my Lynx at the end of July, and I got it back around the 1st of December, after chasing them. But as long as it works, I don't really care. But let's see if it fixed that issue with the screen. It arrived back in the box that I sent it in. Thankfully I did wrap it well in bubble wrap, so yeah, no problems. There's now a sticker on the back from Retro Passion showing that it was recapped, and you can tell someone's definitely been in this machine because the rubber grip handles on the back fall straight off. We'll have to stick them back on somehow. Let's put 6 of Poundland's famous Kodak batteries in and see how we get on. Unfortunately it's made no difference whatsoever to the screen. This wasn't entirely unexpected, but recapping the machine should put it in good shape for the future. I had seen that recapping the machine did fix some of these screen issues, unfortunately not for me. There is thankfully a modern day replacement for these screens. This one's from Ben Ven, and they're an Australian company, so I did have to wait a while for this to be imported, around a month or so. It costs around $91 US, which is about 70 quid. However, this is the latest revision of the screen. They've gone through a few so far, but this one's completely solderless, you don't need to do any soldering whatsoever, so it stops the inside of your Lynx looking like a rat's nest. This is hopefully plug and play with just a little bit of modification. In the pack you get a ribbon cable to connect the new screen to your Atari Lynx. And like I say, previous revisions of this kit were not solder free, you had to manually solder loads and loads of different wires. Thankfully they've done away with that now with this plug and play kit. There's also a 3D printed frame in the pack. This holds the screen in place. Obviously it's a lot thinner than the old one, so this new frame holds it in position. It's got the same mounting holes as the old one though. Okay, let's make a start. So thankfully we don't need to worry about removing the rubber bumpers at the back. If you have a game inserted though, you've got to make sure you take that out before you start, otherwise you won't be able to remove the back. There's 4 screws on the back of the system that you need to remove to get inside it. After you've taken these 4 screws out, you need to take out the hidden one that's in the battery compartment. After that you can finally remove the back from the system. And you can see why we needed to remove the cartridge. It kind of holds it and locks it in place. On the back of the board there's what looks like a copper sheet. I can't think it is though, maybe it's a common ground for all these components. But I suspect Retro Passion had to remove this to get to the capacitors, so you can see they've soldered it back in place. When you've removed the securing screw from the battery tray you can finally take it out. You've got to be really careful though, you don't want to damage these connectors for the battery compartment. You have to kind of lift the board first and then lift the battery connector over it. It's a bit fiddly, take your time, you'll be fine. There's 4 different connectors you need to remove to be able to remove the back board. There's separate connectors for the speaker, the controls, the screen and also the screen backlight. Thankfully we'll be doing away with that backlight, so that's one less thing to plug back in. With the front off you can see the connector for our little speaker. You've got the gold cable there that drives the screen. The smaller green cable connects to the controls on the front of the system, and the other cable on the right lights up the screen through that little fluorescent tube. This is 1980s screen quality at its finest. So let's take a look at our recapped motherboard. We've got some new capacitors on it. I think the red ones are new ones. I'm not sure if the darker ones have been replaced, or maybe they have, that they're a different brand, something like that. Like I say, I'm no expert at soldering, but the solder joints, yeah, they look fine to me. So we need to take the original Lynx screen out the front of the unit. Thankfully this is just held in place with 4 screws. You have to reuse the existing screws to re-screw the new frame in. So don't lose these. Take out the screws, give it a bit of a wiggle, and finally we can take out our old screen. I will hang on to the old screen, I'm not going to throw it away. Just in case if anyone in the future wants to put it back to stock. Who knows why they'd want to go back to this, but they got the option. I'm going to give the inside of the screen its first clean for about 30 years. The last thing you want to do is put this thing back together and find dust on the screen. We can put our new screen in place, make sure you get it the right way up, and make sure you remove the screen protector from the front, otherwise you're going to be really annoyed at the end. You can carefully move the new screen into place. After that you can fix it in position with the orange securing frame. Remember you need to reuse the screws from the old screen. Go careful with the screws though, you don't want to damage the threads in this old plastic. In the very limited instructions I can find on this kit, yeah, it comes with no instructions, you need to remove this blue coil from the motherboard. This handles the high voltage side of the circuit, which is presumably for the old screen. Now personally I'd rather have left this in place, but I can't find for sure if you have to remove this or they just advise you remove this. I don't want to damage the new screen, so I'm going to remove this anyway. But I'm not sure if just removing this high voltage side of the circuit just makes the batteries last longer. But they say to remove it, so let's go. They say you can just wiggle it off the motherboard, but it probably took me about 15 minutes and a few cut fingers. It was a real pain. We're now ready to put things back together, and at this point, if you've got a small child or a very dainty wife, get them to help with this bit. We have to reconnect the ribbon cables for the screen, the controls, and also for the speaker. And if you have halfway human-sized hands for this, it's a real pain. There's just not enough room to get your hand in and plug in the ribbon cables, it's a real pain. I tried plugging them into the motherboard first, and then I tried plugging them into the screen first. You need to pull up the locking collars on the motherboard to be able to slide the ribbon cables in, push them down, lock them in place. You can see how tight things are when you've got the controller ribbon in place, but you still need to attach this other one to the screen. You need to lift the latch on the back of the screen, plug the ribbon cable in, and snap it down in place. I got there in the end though, thankfully, so let's put this thing back together. Put the 4 screws back in the back, not forgetting the one in the battery bay. and let's see if this work paid off. As we put our cheap nasty batteries in, let's just have a look back to see what the screen used to look like. And now after fitting, yeah, it worked first time. And what an absolutely massive difference this has made to this machine. The camera itself might pick up a few squiggly lines, but they're just present on the camera, you don't see it in person. But what a fantastic clear crisp screen. No more lines on the screens, we've got no motion blur, and it's got a great viewing angle as well, so you don't need to tilt it around to get it in the right position anymore. Let's take a quick look at some of the other cartridges I have for the Lynx, just to give you a good idea of the screen and the colour reproduction. It's made a big difference to this machine. Whenever I've wanted to play a game before, I've always just gone back to emulation, but now I'm going to play a few games as they were intended. On the Lynx itself with a proper decent screen finally. I forgot to mention there is an optional bit of soldering you can do with this kit. This just wires up the backlight button on the front of the Lynx. That allows you to change the darkness in steps, but you can already do that with the contrast wheel. And I think it gives you the option to enable scan lines on the screen as well. There are a couple of different Lynx screen kits you can get. There's this one, which is the Ben Ven one. And there's also a kit called the Muck Wheel kit, but I think that requires soldering. But there may be a different version now. Whichever one you get, make sure you get one that doesn't require soldering. It's going to save you a ton of hassle. I fixed the old bumpers back in place with some sticky tape, so let's take a look at some games. There's a good version of Switchblade 2 on the Atari Lynx. I need to pick this back up. I did own it back in the day, but I never quite completed it. I think I got to the last level. It's a great version though. The game Warbirds was one of the earlier games that I saw, and I was really impressed with this. I know it might not look much today, but playing this in 89 to 91, something like that, I thought it was amazing. Coming back to it now, you see the limitations. There's not really a lot to this game, but you try and get something like this at your Sinclair Spectrum back in the day. This is Blue Lightning, and this is the first game I ever saw on the Atari Lynx. Our local independent computer shop, RJ Computers in Bristol, they had a little demo stand of this game. And that might well have been the first time I saw the Lynx as well. I remember being amazed by this at the time. It's absolutely no fun to play though, give it a miss. There's even a port of hard driving on the Atari Lynx. Yeah, it's slow and jerky like pretty much all the other releases of hard driving on the home systems, but you can actually play this one. Still not as good as the Mega Drive version, the version that everyone hates apart from me. In my opinion, there's not a huge amount of great games on the Atari Lynx. It really suffered from lack of third-party developers. There's this game here, Turbo Sub. I remember picking this up. I thought it looked incredible, but it's really boring. There's not much to this game at all. Being able to go underwater and resurface though, that was a bit of a novelty. And before Wipeout and Wipeout 2097, we had our own AG racing game. This is Stun Runner, and I remember playing this quite a lot back in the day. I really enjoyed this. Again, it might not look amazing these days, but look at the Commodore Amiga version or the Sinclair Spectrum version of this game and you'll see how impressive this is. Along with the hard driving arcade, I think the Stun Runner arcade machine cost a ridiculous amount of money back in the day. So to be able to play something that got even close to it in your pocket, absolutely amazing. Let's take a look at some games that actually included some in-game music now. This is Toki, and this is a great little game on the Lynx. I don't think there's actually a bad version of Toki, not that I've seen. But to fit the arcade and a little cartridge a few millimeters thick, yep, they did a great job with this one. I remember one of the games I owned was California Games. It's a little bit too cut down though, this version. There's only 4 different events. There's the cycling event, which is probably the best of the 4. I used to be really good at this. There's surfing, which is a little bit simplistic, but still good fun. There's the skate ramp, and I think I managed to do one move ever on this. I had no idea how you control it. And finally there's footbag, or hacky sack as we knew it in the UK. I don't know why they included this event, it's absolutely rubbish. With a bit more content though, this could have been a great game. Next up is Shadow of the Beast, and in my opinion this is probably one of the best games on the system. So yeah, if you have an Atari Lynx, definitely pick this one up. This is probably one of the only playable versions of this game. Shadow of the Beast has always had a reputation of being graphics over gameplay, but I think this version fixes that. You have to think that this console came out in 1989. And we got some great graphics on this version. It's also a lot more fairer than other versions, and there are some differences as well. There's different objects, the map layout is slightly different. There's some different boss fights as well, but I can actually do quite well at this version. I can get quite far in. So yeah, if you have an Atari Lynx, pick this game up. And this would probably be my top choice for the Atari Lynx. This is Todd's Adventures in Slime World. The graphics might look a little bit basic here, but this is a really fun game to play. There's 6 or so big levels in this game, and it's all about exploration, secret passages, and finding your way out. There's a bunch of different objects such as guns and jetpacks, and there's a good selection of enemies as well. This might also be the only Lynx game that allows up to 8 players at the same time. Now I can't imagine anyone's ever done that. 8 Atari Lynxes, 8 copies of Todd's Adventures, 8 Comlinks cables, and whatever other adapters you need. But yeah, I had a lot of fun with this one back in the day, and it gets my choice for the top spot. Okay, that's going to do us for this time. If you need any of your old systems recapping, get in touch with Retro Passion. Drop a comment if there's any Atari Lynx games you enjoyed growing up with. I'm glad we managed to breathe some life in this old system. It may not have an amazing library of games, but there are a couple of gems in there. You've just got to look for them. Okay, till next time.